Okay, we are live and we can start the meeting.
Okay.
Hey, Sasha, before we get started, I'm trying to notice, has Karen joined the meeting? No.
Yeah.
So we have a small issue that we don't have a quorum.
Right.
So we're expecting to have a quorum, I think, as soon as Karen joins.
Right.
So I think we can go forward with the presentation. But in terms of making recommendations, ideally we would have our
Hey,
quorum.
Shannon,
Yeah.
don't we just need 3 members to have a quorum?
No, five, Jeremy. We are a 9-member body.
So so we count the seats that are filled. So you have 8 seats that are filled. Yes, it's a 9-person committee, 8 seats filled. So we still need a majority. So we still need 5 out of 8. So for those folks who are just joining us new, we just received word from 3 of our commissioners this morning that for different reasons, they are unable to attend or unlikely to attend. We had one who might join late, one who, if their Wi-Fi improved, would try to join, and then a third who was unable to attend at all. So we're hoping that we can get our 5th member here.
And we would need that 5th member to do anything like voting on minutes or any vote.
Yeah. So it might be worth, I don't know, Sasha, do you want to just try to give Karen a call and see if
Sure.
Maybe she's having some sort of technical issue that we can talk her through?
Or get her on the phone, like you suggested earlier.
She can phone in.
And I did not send a message to Stephen Lee. I don't know if you did or.
I can try to see if, let's see, I'm not sure if he had his. Yeah, I'll give Stephen Lee a call.
So Karen did everything she was supposed to do. She can see us and hear us, but we can't see or hear her, and she doesn't appear to be in the meeting. So she's going to try to rejoin. If that doesn't work, she'll call in.
Sasha, did you have any luck?
Oh, did you hear me? Or maybe
I had my headphones
Okay.
off because I was trying to call Stephen Lee.
Karen's doing the right thing. She's following the link in the invite, and like it looks like to her she's in the meeting, but we can't see or hear her. So I told her to press the hang up button and try again. And if that didn't work, that she could call in.
Yeah. I couldn't get through to Stephen Lee, but I texted him to see if he might be able to join us. Sorry, guys, this isn't how we expected the first meeting to go. I know we have like vacation schedules and other things kind of working against us, but okay, I got a reply. Stephen Lee's going to try to join, so.
I just sent Karen the phone number, so.
There he is. All right, we got Stephen Lee.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you for joining us, Stephen Lee. We appreciate it. Okay, Jane, we've got a quorum if you'd like to kick things off.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I'm Jane Matthews, and I would like to welcome you to the June 3rd, 2021 Design Review Committee. Just as information, this is a 9-person committee with 8 appointed members currently, whose primary function is to perform design review for projects located in one of the city's 3 designated design review areas: downtown, the riverfront, and the new hotel overlay zoning districts. This is a mandatory review, voluntary compliance process with one exception for hotels seeking to skip council review. Hotels taking advantage of this incentive must receive a positive recommendation from this committee. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through committee meetings a bit differently. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the City of Asheville's website, and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by calling 855-925-2801 and enter code 9410. When you get to the public comment section later in the meeting, you may dial the same number and press *3. For those of you out there who have joined us today, welcome. I'd like to begin by calling the roll call and introduce the committee members who are participating virtually, and ask you to mute your microphone if you are not speaking when you have a question or you would like to speak. Unmute your microphone. Please remember to mute your phone after you are done speaking. Committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. And okay, Vice Chair Robin Rains.
Good morning.
Good morning. Karen Craig Nolan. She's not here yet. Okay, Jeremy Goldstein.
Present.
Okay. Kimberly Hunter. She was not be able to attend today. Stephen Lee Johnson.
Here. Thank you.
Great to have you by phone. Brian Moffett.
Here.
Okay. Ben Williamson, who was not able to join us today. And myself, Jane Matthews, I'm here. I believe we have a quorum. Is that correct? I will note, according to staff, I mean, we have 5 members present currently, right? Or we have we have 5. That it will take, for the level 2 hotel review, when we move to a vote, if we only have 5 members present, we will need all 5 members to move it along, or else it will need to go to City Council for review. And it is the applicant's right to request to put this, you delay the vote until a later time or bring it back at another meeting. So when we get to that point, if the applicant wants to do that, just to let me know. I think I've got that right. Is that correct, Shannon? I'm ad-libbing here.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So because it requires all 5 members present to vote in favor of the project to meet the requirement to skip council review, if it looks like, I would recommend maybe perhaps taking a straw poll at that time after some discussion if it's not apparent. And if it looks like we don't have the votes for whatever reason, then I think we ask the applicant if they would like to continue to the following month.
I understand. Thank you, Shannon. Okay. Let's see. Cheat sheet here. To help the audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a vocal roll call for each vote if there is a vote to be taken. Additionally, I ask that committee members raise their hands to speak and I will call upon them. We will begin with our administrative items and any unfinished business. So our first administrative item is approval of the minutes from May 20th, 2021. Jeremy, you have a question?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, second by Brian Moffitt. All those in favor, I'll do a roll call vote. Jeremy Goldstein,
Aye.
Brian Moffitt,
Aye.
Robin Rains,
Aye.
Stephen Lee Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Second item on our agenda is unfinished business, which is adoption of rules and of procedure for this committee. Has everybody had a chance to review those? We were given them at the last meeting. And if so, if there are any comments or changes or revisions that need to happen at this point, or a motion to approve as submitted by staff?
I move that we adopt the rules of procedure as submitted.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, I will call the roll and do a vote call. Brian Moffitt,
Aye.
Jeremy Goldstein,
Aye.
Robin Rains,
Aye.
Stephen Lee Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, aye. So we have rules of procedure have been adopted. Okay. So moving on to new business portion of our agenda, we have 4 projects seeking formal design review. We will take these cases in the order that they appear on the agenda. Staff will kick things off with a short presentation, after which the applicant or their design team members will be invited to speak. Once the presentations are done, we will also pause to take any public comment. Please keep in mind that it is not uncommon to have technology issues during these presentations, such as a screen freezing or during public comment, such as participants losing connections. If this happens, exit the meeting and re-enter using the same link or call-in number you used to join. We will now begin with the first new business item on our agenda, which is 57 Roberts Street, a level 1 project. I don't know, staff.
Thank you, Chair Matthews. I will present the 2 level 1 projects.
Thank you.
If Karen Craig Nolan is listening, I texted you the phone number. She tried to come in on the public input number, but we don't really use that number for participating in meetings. So I sent her the Google invite number via text. So our first project is 57 Roberts Street. I will share my screen now. And can you all see that? If somebody could verbally say.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
it's on the screen, Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't join a second time, so I can't see you all. So this project is on Robert Street, just north of the Kent Building, or 90 Robert Street, which some folks know is was an approved hotel, and north of the Phil Mechanic Building. Let me go. So this is the existing site, and I will give a short presentation and then hand it over to Thomas Zizek, who's the architect, so he can make some comments. It is currently a vacant piece of land. It's only 0.12 acres. And the proposal, and so here's some also context photos for buildings that are in the area. And this is a view here looking down Robert Street. So the proposal is for a 3-story brick building. There is a basement on the rear, as you know, the land does fall away. It's a masonry building with a tan brick veneer and CMU on the sides and rear. That's painted the similar color to this brick veneer. Gooseneck lamps. You can see, I will zoom in a little bit here for you. There are metal, I believe steel canopies over both doors, limestone lintels and headers on these windows, black aluminum window casings, and storefront windows. This project was reviewed by the Planning and Design Review Committee of the AARRC, which no longer really exists, but they did a thorough review of this project and voted 3-0 to approve it. So recommending approval. Here are floor plans. This is the basement area. This is Robert Street on the right. There's a driveway that comes off Robert Street, and you turn into an in the building parking area, and then part of it is outside. There's a small gallery space on the first floor, and then the second and third floors are residential. The second floor is 2 units, and the top floor is 1 unit. Let's see. Staff review basically came to the conclusion that this does comply with the riverfront guidelines. I just wanted to see if there's any other pages here that you would like to look at. There is a kind of a trash area in the back that it will be screened with a wood and steel screening. There is some small equipment on the rooftop that is screened by a parapet. There are 2 street trees being planted. I believe they're service berries, which are appropriate and edibles, and in season now, if anyone wants to go pick. There are windows on the south facade and not any on the north facade, as the understanding is that the adjacent property owner plans to build up to the property line or could build up to the property line. And then at the rear, there is fenestration and a deck on the 3rd floor. And I'm happy to stop there. And I think my staff report sums it up, and I don't know if Thomas, the architect, would like to make any comments now.
No, I think Sasha, I think you hit everything. The owners are local and they are artists, so they're excited about helping this area and kind of rejuvenating it and keeping a gallery too. One's an artist, so having a gallery on the first level is important to them.
Okay. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks.
And I'll open it up for discussion among the committee members. Any comments?
Kudos on the restraint.
I'll offer one comment, that I have in looking at it a second time, and that is just the use of a tan brick is just doesn't seem compatible to the street facades and the existing buildings on Robert Street, which are all brown red brick buildings. And where tan is, it's painted brick or it's the back side of a building like on an alley. And so it's not a common material. And that's the only thing I don't know if they'd be amenable to changing that, but it just seems like that's not compatible with the existing buildings.
Jane,
Yes, Jeremy?
so what makes it incompatible? I mean, do we want every building to look the same?
No, but that's kind of, I mean, a painted brick is what was where the tan shows up the most. This was a painted facade. That's not even a good preservation solution. So it's not a color that you would normally have on a masonry building.
You know, for us, I talked to the client about that, and as they would be open, but they really love this color. And the idea was that Clingman, I thought, had a little more flexibility. And like Jeremy mentioned, we're not there to make it look exactly like the buildings next door. We wanted to add a little variety. So that's kind of why we went with that.
Any other thoughts?
I'm sorry, Jane, I'm trying to look up the River Arts guidelines for that.
So the painted brick, I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying there is tan brick, but it's because it was painted?
That's where I saw on looking at the street views further down, going the other direction, I guess south on Robert Street.
Yeah, when I was reviewing this project, I'm sorry, Jeremy, I did look at, Patty Torno's buildings down there on River Arts Place, and they're tan, and I wasn't sure if those were painted or original, kind of a whiter, even bright, a little lighter than this brick, but I did see.
Yeah, I looked at Robert Street facades, and I'd have to pull up the street views again, but there are a couple of buildings, and you can see that they're painting, they're peeling. You can see the red brick below.
I mean, my opinion would be natural brick I guess the color is less important to me. The fact that we're using natural unpainted brick seems to be a good design choice. And the fact that there's a lot of red brick that may have been what was available at the time that those older buildings were built, but I don't think it's incompatible. But again, that's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise the design, I think, does a good job at other elements of the design are great, and the use is a good use for the street. So Sasha, I don't know if we have any public comment.
Chair, there is no one in the queue.
Okay, thank you, David. I appreciate that. And if there's no other comment, I'd entertain a motion.
I would
Jeremy?
make a motion. Is there a?
There's a
Sorry.
recommended motion.
Yeah, I'm a little behind. I have too many. I have to get the right screen up. Sorry. Here it is.
Chair, someone just entered the queue. I'm not sure if it's on this manner. If you'd like me to connect them.
Is there a way for you to check, David, what they want to speak about?
I do not believe so. I just have a phone number that I can see.
Is there a hand up? Is the hand up?
No, it says in menu right now. Can you see it on your end, Sasha?
Yeah, their hand is up. So.
Oh, now it is, yes.
So I guess, do you want to see if let them in and see if they want to speak to this project?
Sure, I will connect them now.
Hello, this is Rachel Larson from Park Square. Hi, Sasha, Jane, and many other people that devote so much of your time to making our community beautiful. I guess I had one question about the height of the building with the parapet. I know that was definitely a concern when we were talking about the form-based code before. As far as the color of the building, I personally don't mind a lighter color just because it may not be quite as intrusive for our particular view shed looking west. It's definitely a more modern look than some of the other buildings. I do enjoy, kind of more eclectic, but I don't mind the lighter color, so I do like that.
Thank you for your comments,
That's
Rachel.
my comment. Thanks.
Staff, are there any concerns about the height in relation to the form-based code?
I am looking as fast as I can to see what the height limit is. I will tell you all that I don't do a zoning review. I'm just doing design review. And the overall height when adjacent to residentially zoned property is 3 stories or 45 feet. So that's the zoning code, and I believe obviously it's 3 stories, and 45 feet seems like it gives you a little bit of extra room for parapets. Thomas, does that sound like the total height of your building from the front door?
Right. We were at 43, and I think we're allowed 45. I think we're allowed 4 stories with a setback, possibly. I don't know if that's true or not, but right now we're at 43 and just 3 stories.
Okay. Thank you.
And I assume the basement is classified under the code as a basement and not as another story. Right, Thomas?
Correct.
Right, and for zoning, we count from the primary pedestrian entrance on the street. So zoning and building code heights are different a little sometimes.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, Jeremy, go ahead, please.
I move to recommend approval of 57 Robert Street project as presented based on the site plans, elevations, and materials submitted and discussions heard during this review, and find that the project meets the intent of the River District Design Review Guidelines.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. I'll call the question. Vice Chair Robin Rains.
Aye.
Okay. Did Karen Cognolan join? No. Okay. Jeremy Goldstein.
Aye.
Stephen Lee Johnson. So we lost Stephen Lee.
Aye.
Okay, aye. Great. Thank you, Stephen Lee. Brian Moffett.
Aye.
And myself, aye. So this project has been approved. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to the second item on our agenda, which is 240 Clingman Avenue extension, excuse me. Sasha, I guess you're presenting this again?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also getting calls, getting texts about Karen's still trying to get in here, so. Okay. Sorry, so the second project is at 240 Clingman Avenue. And this is in an existing building. That's a part of a set of brick buildings built in the 40s. Here today, we have Matt Milne with Terra Firma Design here. This is, the majority of the work is happening on the inside of this building, kind of a rehab and reorganizing of the space. So this committee is just concerned with the external changes. And I didn't pull up a street view, but I'm happy to do that for you all. The front of this is the old Jonas Gerard studio space. And currently, so if you see here on this plan, these windows and the door, those are all staying exactly the same. And my understanding, and I'll let Matt correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that this is the location of the current kind of white roll-up garage door that's there now. And then, they are leaving this brick alone and proposing signage here. So the proposal is to have a smaller roll-up glass door these two, I think it's just one door, but all glass, and then adding a new aluminum storefront door. This, and I should have said this for the last project too, both of these went to the River Commission as well, just for review. This came in later I think in April. And so it has not been to any informal reviews, but it's a fairly small project. The Riverfront Commission didn't express any concerns about the design. And I remember Jane commenting on the new glass and the roll-up door, allowing more light into the space. So staff found that this is compatible with the surrounding district, and I'll stop there. And Matt, I don't know if you have any comments you would like to make about this project, or if you want me to pull anything up, I'm happy to do that.
No, just it will be in fact 2 doors there. I can say that the client's very interested in maintaining, and the landlord are interested in maintaining the historic character of the building, and we feel that the doors that we have proposed are adding aesthetic value. They will certainly increase light into the building, and though this isn't about use, but we do feel that the new use of the building will contribute to the character of the community there. So that's really all I have to add, though.
So Matt, I have one question. Is that a functional reason to have those still remain as garage doors?
Yes, one will open up to a future retail space, small retail space. The other, the door to the left, lines up with a loading ramp that will be used for bringing materials in and out. The ramp is also currently used for the cafe that is next door. They will still have use for that.
So deliveries will be on the street.
Correct. Yeah, that is historically a loading bay right there. And that was what it was used for originally. So.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion among the committee members? Okay, hearing none. David, is there any public comment?
Chair, there is no one in the queue at this time.
Thank you, David.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Jeremy, please.
Again, we've already heard this, the River Commission, so. I move to recommend approval of the storefront changes to 240 Clingman Avenue extension as presented based on the site plans, elevations, and materials submitted and discussions heard during this review, and find that the project meets the intent of the River District Design Review Guidelines.
Your second?
I'll second.
Second by Robin Rains. I'll call the roll. Jeremy Goldstein.
Aye.
Robin Rains.
Aye.
Brian Moffett.
Aye.
Stephen Lee Johnson.
Aye.
And myself, aye.
Madam Chair, I see Karen Craig Nolan on the phone in the meeting, and it looks like she's in here twice somehow, but I don't know if Karen can try to, pressing *6 unmutes you.
Karen, are you there? No, not getting any response. So.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the project has been approved. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next project on our new business is 159 and 144 Riverside Drive, a conditional zoning. I don't know who's presenting that from staff. Is that Sasha or
I'll
Shannon?
be taking this one.
Thank you.
think we
So
had
Karen, I just muted you. Okay. Oh, she left.
oh.
Oh no.
Okay, let me try. So like Sasha, I'll be sharing my screen, and I won't be able to see your faces once I start to share the screen. So if you need me to pause, please just speak up, and if you have any questions. So as Madam Chair had indicated, this is a new project located at 159 and 144 Riverside Drive. This is actually 2 parcels. The entire project area includes 2 parcels. The larger parcel is just under 3 acres located on the east side of the road. This is where the majority of the development and construction will occur. And then there's a smaller parcel, 1.65 acres, located across Riverside Drive from the subject property, kind of on the southern end, and that's 144 Riverside. And the project includes a surface parking lot in this location. So as the staff report had indicated, this is a conditional zoning request for a new 6-story building, and it's a mixed-use building that will include 160 dwelling units, approximately 14,000 square feet of commercial space at the lowest level, and 198 off-street parking spaces. And those off-street parking spaces are a combination of structured and surface spaces. The project's been through technical review. It's been through informal review, as well as review with the Asheville Area Riverfront Redevelopment Commission. Technical review identified that the project complies with most of the Forum Code standards that would apply to the project. There are just a couple, well, I should point out that there's a few that don't comply, but it's primarily rooted in some physical constraints that are associated with the property. The project includes the preservation of the existing mill building and smokestack, and this will be incorporated into the new construction. And so this mill building kind of creates like a little bit of a pinch point here at the north end. We also have some overhead utilities that kind of run along the south end of the 159 property. And that's why you see this little jog in the building. It's a very long kind of linear building, but it does have a little bit of interest in this jog. But and that kind of creates an interesting design effect. But it's actually primarily based in this, by the conflict with these overhead utility lines. So we have, as a result of these constraints, we've got a couple exceptions related to the planting strip located on the north end. We normally require 6 feet. This is approximately 4 feet. We also have a setback. The setback exceeds the maximum allowed in the district just only slightly. And again, it's because of this utility conflict. The surface parking across the street at 144 just barely encroaches into the minimum setback for parking on the opposite side, kind of in that most southern corner there, closest to the road. The driveway width also exceeds the maximum allowed. And normally that's 24 feet. I'm not sure if the 26 feet that is shown is really necessary or if that's just something that the designers just kind of went with. But so if that could be modified to bring it down to 24 feet, that would comply. But if there's a compelling reason to keep the 26 feet, then that's something that can be considered as an exception as this project moves through the conditional zoning process. A couple other exceptions that we want to point out is story height. As you all are likely aware, height of new construction in the River District is controlled both through an overall height limit, which in this case is 70 feet, and story height. This zoning district has a maximum story height of 5 stories, which would include any above ground parking podiums. So it's about controlling the visual impact of the structure. So we would count anything that's sort of above ground, and that's kind of described in the code. So we have a ground level parking podium, and then we've got 5 stories above that. And I will talk through that a little bit more when I get to the building elevations. But while I'm on the site plan, I also wanted to point out that there is an exception also for the maximum building length. This is a fairly long building facade. It's largely driven by the shape of the lot. It's kind of long and thin, and it does exceed the maximum building length without having a punctuation through the building. So if you're familiar with the form code standards, it gives a couple options where the parking podium is allowed to be continuous across the entire length of the building. But for the stories that are above the parking podium, they give you two options. One is to do like a 15 by 15 opening that can have stories above, but it's an opening to air and light that allows movement through the building. Or you could just sort of take that entire section out, and that's described in the form code. This project includes those. Let me actually just go ahead and scroll down to those elevations. I think that would be helpful. So these are the renderings. Here we go. So here you see what should be every 200 feet, you should have an opening. So what the applicant is proposing is to glass it in. So it's in one sense open to light, but not open to air. And so it doesn't kind of punctuate and go all the way through. So it technically doesn't comply. I think they're trying to meet the intent to some degree, but I think that's a question for the committee to wrestle with. And then story height, I wanted to pause here as well. So you can see here's the continuous parking podium. And then above that, we've got 5 stories for approximately, if you look at the overall elevation, you've got 5 stories for approximately maybe half of the structure. And then you've got 4 stories on the ends. And it's because we have a very tall sort of retail commercial level on either end, tall enough that for this midsection, you can actually fit 2 residential stories in there. You can also see here from the building elevation, the incorporation and the renovation of the existing mill building. So you can see that they're hoping to kind of channel most of the pedestrian activity through this mill building as sort of the primary entrance to the project area. And then there will be connection up to the upper level. This project actually has 2 pedestrian zones. It's got the sidewalk zone with the planting strip at the street level. And then you rise up and you've got sort of a secondary pedestrian zone above the parking podium, entering the residential units as well as the non-residential space. The material palettes were included. I think I've got a better, yep, here we go. Here you can see some of the materials that are proposed. They are attempting to reflect the historic character, both in design as well as materials with this project, by using the sort of red, the traditional sort of red brick found in a lot of the mill buildings with these dark metal accents around the windows, the railings, the awnings, and then also some Corten steel and board formed concrete. You can see some of the other detailing that they've also provided with the plans. I'd like to just briefly go back to the site plans now that we've kind of talked about some of the exceptions. I was speaking with the engineer earlier today. So all conditional zoning projects that are of this scale, level 3 conditional zonings, have to rezone to one of the city's expansion districts. Now, those expansion districts say if you're in a design review area, you actually follow the form code standards when they're in conflict. So the expansion district requires a 10-foot wide sidewalk, which is what is shown on the applicant's site plans. And because of that wider sidewalk, we have a narrower planting strip. Now, the form code district requires an 8-foot sidewalk. And so in speaking with the designer earlier, we realized that one of those exceptions for that pinch point on the northern end could probably be at least mitigated, if not removed entirely, by simply reducing the sidewalk from 10 feet to 8 feet. And we think that 8 feet is consistent with the RAD code. It's a little bit more consistent to have this wider planting strip with with the sidewalk behind it, with the rest of the sidewalk work that's been included in the RAD tip. So I think that is a change to this plan that staff would support and would help address that one particular exception that was noted. And I should also say that story height is not a particular concern of staff's either. You know, as I said, we regulate height both by regulating the overall height and the number of stories. In this particular case, the project complies with the overall height standard. It just simply has that extra story in it. And they're able to do that because, well, they're doing it partly because we're counting that parking podium. If you didn't count it, it would fully comply, but the code makes it pretty clear that you should count it. But otherwise it does comply. I think our concern with tucking in that extra story, that extra residential story, would be relevant if the project were underparked, but it's not. This project has sufficient parking. It's comfortably within the minimum and maximum. In fact, as one of their conditions with the conditional zoning, they're proposing to set aside, I believe it was 11 or 12 spaces with the lot across the street for public use. So there's a public benefit associated with this project as well. One thing that came up in the discussion with the Riverfront Commission had to do with a proposal to incorporate some signage on the smokestack. We asked the applicant to kind of consider what that might look like, and we think it's an important point for this committee to consider if that is something that can be supported. So we received a couple illustratives earlier today, kind of illustrating what they're proposing. I've got another one here. Let me sort of slide it over so you can see it as well. Kind of give you an idea of what they're thinking. They did clarify in the last discussion that they are referring only to a paint on. It would not be applied to the smokestack. It would just be a sign that's painted on. And there may be some artwork associated as well. Just to clarify for the commission, it might be, the artwork might be a design consideration that you want to discuss. But from a signage standpoint, we would not consider any artwork or any like address identification. If there is going to be business or project identification on the smokestack, we would count that as signage. Projects like this are permitted what we call sort of a multi-tenant identification sign that could be included, that could potentially meet that need. And then there's separate signage allowances for the individual businesses, if there's a restaurant or other commercial retail use in that one ground level or that one level above the parking podium, then that's a separate allowance that's contemplated in the RAD code. So we would recommend that any identification signage that's included on the tower be included in the overall allowance or be counted towards the overall allowance. The conditions associated with this project make it separate, so they would have this sign plus any other signage that might be permitted by code. And that is, of course, contingent upon the commission supporting the idea of using the smokestack for signage.
Shannon, I'm confused. Are you saying this would be part of the overall sign package, or this would be in addition to?
So the applicant is requesting that this signage be in addition to whatever signage would be normally allowed. And the staff's opinion is that it really just should be counted as part of the sign. Whatever the sign allowance is, that this should be part of that and not be in addition to. And that's something that we'll take up probably through the conditions associated with the project as it moves through City Council. But if this committee had an opinion about that, it would be helpful to hear. As I mentioned, this project was reviewed by, let me move these off, sorry. This was reviewed by the informally and also by the Riverfront Commission. The commission did offer a number of comments of appreciation for the balconies, for opportunities for screening of the parking with some greenery. The the use of the materials, the general industrial aesthetic. Also, permeable paving is proposed for the surface parking across the street. That was noted. And also particularly for just the street level activation that you can see in these renderings. I think we have a couple more. Let me see if we get to the end here. Whoops. No, I think that might have been it. So those were all some of the positive things that they pointed out. The strongest concern that was expressed was providing for some sort of safe crossing between the principal building and that surface parking lot across the street that would be used to help support the project. The conditions for the project that were submitted by the applicant includes the adding a crosswalk at the north end across Riverside Drive. Should that crosswalk be supported by the approving agency? This is a city maintained street, so that would be the city. So provided the city transportation department can support that, the applicant is committed to providing that crosswalk.
Shannon, could you show us on the site plan where you're talking about? Because I don't know how you get from the parking to there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So this is the north end, the mill building, and the applicants and their team members are in the meeting as well. So when they speak, if anything I've stated incorrectly, please feel free to correct me. But from what I understand, based on the conditions that have been submitted, is it would be located across Riverside Drive here at that north end from the mill building. And then there's an existing 5-foot sidewalk that comes down the property to the surface parking.
Thank you, Shannon.
So staff does recommend, we do think that this project is aligned with the requirements and guidelines, and we are recommending a few conditions. One, it has to do with that signage, making sure that the committee supports the signage and that it is included in the overall sign allowance for the project. Would really like to know what the committee thinks of the punch-through openings. We are recommending that they go all the way through and that provides light and air and that they not be glassed in. And the tree strip be widened, which does mean a reduction in the sidewalk width, but we think that that's more consistent and compatible with the fabric of the River Arts District today. So we support that. So we would be swapping one exception for another potentially, but I think it would result in better tree health and is, again, consistent with the area. So those would be our recommendations. I'd be happy to answer any questions or go back through any of the materials. Otherwise, I know the applicant and their team members are here. I'm sure they would probably like to add a little more detail to what I've already offered.
Shannon, I just have one question. Has there been a formal shared parking agreement on those 12 spaces you mentioned?
No, but it is included in the B1 conditions, if I recall.
Okay.
Warren, is that correct? I think I remember seeing them in the latest draft.
That's right. I believe there are 10. I think it's 10 spaces, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So that would be binding. If this project were to be approved by council, those conditions become requirements.
Just for my own benefit, is that something that we as a design review committee should be considering, the parking spaces?
I mean, whether or not they're public or not, I don't believe so. I don't know how that really exactly fits into the guidelines. But in terms of understanding the overall project and its impacts, I think it's okay to ask those questions.
Yeah, my concern was just pedestrian access too. I mean, if you're going to provide that, allowing for pedestrians to cross. It's been spoken about, but I haven't seen it. So it's good to get some clarification today.
Shannon, would staff still support the exception to the building length if the punch throughs remain glassed in?
Sorry, hang on one second. Let me get my screen back here. So I'm sorry, ask that question again. Would we still support it if the punch throughs remain glassed?
Yes, that's one of the recommendations, is that the punch through openings are made open to light and air, not glassed in. And if I could have misunderstood, but I think one of the reasons you're allowing some of the length of the building that's over the 200 feet, it must be broken up with daylit openings, and but they're enclosing them in glass. So I didn't know if it would still meet the intent if they are glassed openings.
No, that's why it's listed as an exception, is it doesn't meet the intent if they're glassed. I'm looking through the form code standards here, and I can share with the committee. Let me see if I can't find it real quick. There's a good illustration in the code that kind of illustrates what, yep, here we go. Here it is. Let me know when you can see that. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, thank you,
So you
Shannon.
see the maximum building length options for the street-facing facade. It says that, every 200 feet, you should break it up. It gives you an exception for the parking podium. It says that can be continuous all the way across the length of the building. But you have these two options. You can either interrupt and just provide this pedestrian staircase up and have this just totally open, or you can provide this kind of punch through opening that's, open to light and air, and then it has some stories above. This is basically what the applicant is proposing, but they're proposing to glass this in. And I don't think that really meets the intent of what was the goal, which is to really have that open and have the shadow and the air movement and the light, kind of going through. I think having it glassed in, allows them to maintain their conditioned space, but it doesn't really achieve, the interruption of that long facade. But I am interested in hearing what the committee thinks, if they think that is something that should be considered. Is that something that can be supported as this project moves to council? It would be an exception.
Shannon, do you know if they would both have to be completely open for it to be brought into compliance, or just one of them could be glassed in?
I believe they both have to. I think because of the length of this building, they're required to punch throughs or two, openings.
Okay. And I've got one more question. Maybe this is for the applicant. Have they submitted any materials on how they're planning to flood-proof the adaptive reuse rehabilitation of the existing mill building?
I am not aware of how they intend to do that, and I would defer to the applicant. It is a historic building. I think there are some exceptions for historic buildings, and I'm not sure if that's what they're imagining in this case or not. But
okay. And then I'm assuming we don't have any kind of three-dimensional representations of what this building looks like from the rear or Craven Street or any of the other angles. Correct.
No, I did share your hope to see something like that with the applicant. I think it just came a little too late. They didn't have enough time to pull something together.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But yeah.
And I know one concern that was brought up during review was whether the backside was also screened like the front, which we thought was a good solution. And if my recollection was that it was not screened, the parking was not screened.
That's correct. My understanding is it was not screened, and that it actually was required to be open for air movement on that opposite side.
But you could get the air movement with screening.
Yeah, true. I guess I was imagining that there was some talk of screening combined with vegetation crawling up the screening. So. I'm sure the applicant can clarify that further.
Yeah, I don't know if Warren would like to make any presentation or.
I believe Wyatt's on here. He may start us off.
Yeah, sure. So, Madam Chair and members of the review committee, my name is Wyatt Stevens with Robertson Stevens, and it's a privilege to be here today on behalf of BRN Development, the developer of this proposed developer of this project. With me today is Warren Sugg, whom you know from Civil Design Concepts, and also Chris Denome with the Beck Group. The Beck Group is providing the architectural, and of course, CDC is providing the civil engineering. You know, there were a number of questions raised, and why don't we just jump into those? I think the most recent one related to screening on the backside of the building. Chris, Warren, you guys want to jump in and take that one?
Sure, this is Chris. We do have to keep that backside open, but we are screening it visually with and I believe it's shown on the site plan there. We do have a fence that will go around to secure parking and provide some visual screening on the back side of that. Now on the front side, we do have where we want to interact and have the pedestrian traffic there along Riverside. We also have screening there. That's going to be the mesh screening, which again will allow water to flow through. But really the idea there is to have a vine growing on that mesh so that it, again, allows water and we kind of meet all of the flood requirements. But we also want it to be very visually appealing there on that ground floor. Also provide some texture down there.
And I would also add, Madam Chair, you know, if you're on that site, you know that right behind that building, of course, is Norfolk Southern Railway.
Railroad, yeah.
Which is a little bit elevated. And from a visual standpoint, I agree with Brian. It's a good ask to have a rendering of that backside so we all know what it's going to look like. But in my mind, I'm not thinking it's going to be, even if it were totally open, that it's going to look unusual in that way because of the elevation of the railroad tracks there.
Yeah, it's just that there are people uphill, from that site, and that was always has been mentioned before. So, Chris, you mentioned a fence. What kind of a fence are you talking about on the perimeter?
It's going to be something more, I want to say like a black fence, and I think we have some visuals there. Now the screening material is going to be, and again, we provided some visuals of the material itself. Yeah. So, and one of the things I do want to address, I know it was brought up on one of our last phone calls, is the trash enclosure. We would most definitely screen that similar to how we would on the front side, so that would be screened. We almost look at that as a double screen wall. We want to keep the trash enclosure itself screened with the same material we have along Riverside. And yet, again, provide a secondary level of screening with the fence that's further back.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
So I think the next question in terms of timing when it came up was the punch through. Chris, can you speak to your thoughts on from a both design and visual standpoint, but also environmental consciousness and what your thinking was about not punching all the way through that building and opening it up?
Sure. And I think, Brian, maybe as you had mentioned, to meet code standards, we do need to have both of those punch through openings there. So just to confirm, we are setting those openings back 15 feet from the face of the buildings. They are back 15 feet. They are 15 feet wide, and it would be 11 feet clear height from structure to structure. Our thought process, very candidly, was we were meeting the spirit of the code to be able to provide that visual look through the building. Again, full glass, full transparency, so you get light, you do get the shadow effect, you get everything. But from a standpoint of usability, functionality, HVAC, even residents, if the residents had to cart in and out on each side, we looked at it as something where we were meeting the spirit of the code and the intent by, again, providing that break in the length of the building, because that's really what it was about, is a 15-foot back and then a 15-foot wide break in that building to give it the appearance of multiple sections of building. So yes, we're doing that. Our request though is just the on that first floor there. And again, we think it's a reasonable request. It's not something that's unallowable per the form-based code. So we think it's reasonable just to glass those in from a security and an HVAC standpoint.
And if I can,
I'm happy to answer anything else about that.
I've got a
So you're talking about only enclosing the ground floor, Chris? Is that what I'm hearing?
So our level 1, as you come up the stairs, that would be the glassed enclosed area.
The promenade area, the above the parking.
But then above
And
Yes.
then
that,
the
it would
levels
be
above that
open.
were already, so they remember the two options in the code is to be open all the way up the building or to have that opening. So their design is just having the one small opening above the parking podium. And then they have occupied units above that.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the elevations.
Yeah, can you go back and clarify that? I'm getting confused in the discussion here.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody else is, but
Very.
yeah.
What is
there-
the material in that enclosed portion above the opening?
Again, we would look to use glass and glazing there so that on both the Riverside Drive side and also on the back side, that is fully glassed in, but the glass allowing light movement and shadows. You can see it there, yeah.
So
Above though, what is the material on the upper floors? I can't tell from that hatch pattern what that's supposed to be.
Oh, that's going to be brick material.
Okay.
So it's solid above the ground, the parking
Correct,
platform.
yeah.
It's all solid all the way up.
It's solid, but again, it is set back.
It's a
and
niche.
that's-
It's a niche. Yeah.
Niche,
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's solid. You don't see through it.
Correct. That is correct.
Shannon,
You
could
see through the first occupiable level. Is that correct, Chris? When you have parking, then the next level up, you have all glass. You can see through the whole way. And then once you go above, call it the glass level, then you get your brick.
Correct. And again, I think the only issue in question is that first level above the parking where there's the glass right now. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Shannon. That's the level. Again, we think from a functionality standpoint, it makes sense to glass that in. And that's what we're humbly requesting is permission to do that on the two sides. Everything else about that setback, again, and we feel it meets code, but everything else there on both of those notches meets all of the standards as far as what's required for that length of building. And really this is driven as was mentioned, the site design. There are so many constraints on the site. That's where the building ended up being so long and rather thin by comparison. We've got the railroad easement on the backside on the backside on the east side. On the west side, we have the, as Shannon was talking about, the power lines there. On the north side, we have the existing mill building and smokestack, which, we want to rehabilitate those and utilize those as the main entrance to the project and really pull people into that. So those are some of the form and function reasons where we ended up with this design. We're excited about it and we're happy about it. Just one of the quirks of the design is we would like permission to glass those in.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Shannon, if you can, go to the site plan so we can see kind of from above where the power lines are and so forth. There we go. So, Chris or Warren, can you speak to, there were several things in the staff report that Shannon covered related to setbacks. One was the building setback on the south end. The staff believes that we need an exception and correctly noted that the setback is related to the power lines. But I understand, Chris, you studied the code on that. Could you address that point?
Certainly, yeah. And our team, everybody on the team, Warren included, we've worked hard to meet all of the code conditions of the form-based code. on that south side there, because we do have a public utility easement and it's right in that area, we are up against that utility easement, but that is actually allowable per the form-based code because, or as a result of that easement. The setback there can be reduced to 0, and we are at 0 at that utility easement. So again, we've taken the building itself and moved it up to Riverside as much as possible. And Shannon, that's a little, if you go to the river section, one more section down.
I know the section you were referring to. I looked at it as well, and it was just a little hard to. Here it is. In cases where
There you go. Yeah.
utility easement.
Yeah.
It's more than 15 feet from the back of curb, the minimum setback. I just didn't, quite honestly, I just couldn't quite figure out how to interpret that. The minimum setback may be reduced to 0 feet, and a 0-foot setback usually means it's up against the street. So I wasn't sure if they were trying to refer to a utility easement at the rear of a property, but that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. In this case, we're up against that easement there.
Yeah.
That easement just happens to be in the front of the property.
Right. Right. So we definitely did not have any concern. I mean, we definitely recognize that there is a constraint there. And so it may be that we could interpret that section that complies. If it didn't comply, we don't have a problem with the exception. We think there's really no way around it short of just not building the building there. So that wasn't a particular concern of ours, but I think it's helpful to have the conversation.
Hey, while we're in that area and we're talking about that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Wyatt.
Go ahead, Warren.
While we're in that area, we're talking about that utility easement, and I think there was a comment about the 24-foot driveway. Because of that easement and the power lines, we had some early conversations with the fire marshal's department and talked with Brian, and the requirement is a 26-foot wide apparatus road through there, and because of that limited ability to get an apparatus right there to that southern area, we have to be 26 foot wide to meet the state and the city's fire code. So we, that is a code that we have to apply to.
From an architectural standpoint, yeah, we have no use for that.
Warren, while the site plan is up here, I wonder if you can talk about the bike parking, because that was something that came up in the previous reviews, where you were going to put it and how it was going to be distributed on the site.
Yeah, so we do have some bike storage shown sort of in the middle of the page, just behind the stair tower. We have been thinking about also having some bike storage up closer to the mill building and smokestack, and then obviously we would want to have some over on 144 as well. We'd even contemplated the ideas of making some sort of public art type thing that could also be bike storage. And then Chris, you may be able to tell us a little more about the internal guts of the building and some bike storage that could happen inside of that.
Sure, yeah, and I got to give Warren all the credit because he came up with the idea. But as far as using more art as opposed to a standard bike storage, we do have currently conceptually at each one of the public entrances that's along Riverside, we've got storage there, and then also up there at the northwest corner of the building, some storage, some bike storage there. We wanted to really put it at all of the adjacent to all of the prominent public entrances. Not only is it code required, but it makes the most sense. We really want to activate, and I think you can see that by the renderings. We think the city has done a great job as far as activating the riverfront there, and we want to continue that. And we really want to be the anchor and pull people in and activate that first floor space. And part of that is being able to provide the public bike storage so that people who are biking up and down the riverfront when they do want to stop and have a coffee or a beer or whatnot, that they have a place in which to properly secure their bike. But at the same time, we want to add a little bit of whimsy and art to it. So that's where we are thinking that some of the actual storage itself would be made by some local artists there.
And I guess my question for staff is, how does that get confirmed at what point? There's a lot of talk, but there's nothing on the drawings that shows the, here's the, on 44, we're going to put bike parking, because that was brought up, having it near the greenway.
So it's a technical requirement, the amount of bike parking that's required. And so unless they're seeking a specific exception to that requirement, it's all of the technical standards would have to be satisfied. So we would check that at final TRC.
So if they're saying the intent is to have it on the riverside, then staff would make sure that they do that. Is what you're saying?
We would. So again, unless it gets incorporated into the conditions that specifically says the majority of it will be here or there, as long as it's in the project, we don't have any requirements for how it gets distributed. It just has to be in the project area.
Yeah.
So I think if they really want to be specific about it and it's something that this committee feels is important, you could make some recommendations that could be considered where we are very specific and say, 50% is located here and the other, rest is located around the entrances. However you think is appropriate, we can do that. But otherwise, staff would just check to make sure the number of spaces are included in the overall project.
I understand the code requirement. I'm just hearing the applicant saying they're going to put it someplace specifically, and I don't see it. So I'm just trying to figure out how we keep that on track.
We make
for
it a
compliance.
They can update their plans or their conditions associated with the project is what
Or
I
we
would
make it a recommendation if we approve it. Yeah, I understand, Brian. I think Sasha had a comment.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Ms. Craig Nolan we can't hear her apparently. Her phone number is in the meeting, and so she can hear the conversation, and she's asked several questions, and so she passed them on to me for me to.
Great.
The first question was, please describe how the underground cisterns would work with the water table. And then there's a few others, but they're unrelated, so I can wait for the answer, and I can give you the next one.
Thank you, Sasha. Warren, do you want to say?
Yeah, so I can speak to the stormwater. So yeah, we've been looking at a lot of different stormwater applications here. Certainly got some nice green spaces where we fully expected we would have some rain gardens. We recognize we're going to have an underground storm tech system for capturing runoff and infiltrating and release. And then we have been talking about in the planned show rainwater harvesting. And, we are still pretty early on in the process, but there's been a lot of talk about, the correct spot for that, correct uses for that. And I think the combination of all those things are going to meet and exceed the city's, standards on stormwater. And, as mentioned, much of the river area and specifically this project is within floodplain. So, we do have that parking that's down on the lowest level. We do have to have that ability for during big events, waters to sort of flow in and flow out. That's the whole reason why we have to have that screening. But then to meet FEMA and state requirements, we have to have at least 50% openings on that screening. So there is a lot that goes into the stormwater part of it, and those are the items that we've been contemplating and showing on the plans to this point.
So the response is, so is the stormwater design been finalized at this point? No, Brian's shaking it.
No, you have this conditional zoning process where you lay it out and it goes through, and maybe Sasha, you and Shannon can speak more to it. We conceptually lay these things out, put them to the correct size, but the final construction drawings happen after final TRC, and would be a much more detailed set of calculations and drawings.
Okay. Anyways, let me just say these questions and maybe you can respond to all of them. I don't know. Next one is, how much of design placement has been dictated by the Brownfield agreement? And the comment is, when we first got the building, and Karen used to be with Riverlink that owns this property today. So when we first got the building and we were trying to get people to find the river, no one knew how. We told folks just to follow the smokestack. I don't support any written item on the smokestack. I'd much prefer some public art on the riverside that is visible from the bridge and makes a statement. So that's, I guess, more of a comment. The next one is glass on the parking area. Wouldn't that impede the flow of water? And then last question is, what is the plan for the original boiler in the boiler room of the remaining building? Which I guess is internal to that building, but a historic piece.
I can just, to make sure to clarify, there's no glass on the ground floor parking level, just to hopefully clarify that, and my apologies if I misspoke there. So as far as the boiler, there are not any specific plans for that at this point. We think it's an awesome piece and we want to keep it and do something with it. We're just not, quite frankly, we're not at the stage yet there for that. As far as the smokestack, again, we very much want to celebrate. That's an iconic feature, and we're just looking to make that more iconic in our minds. We are not trying to create any type of project signage. And in fact, that's where what you see there is more the district signage and related to district, whether it says RAD or River Arts. We're trying to do something with that smokestack that would help signify the river district as a whole. And so, quite frankly, those were some initial ideas and concepts. Those by no means are the end all be all as far as we're concerned. But we're here asking this committee, is there support for that or not? We would look to, if there is support for that, move forward and kind of pull those forward with a local artist and work with a local artist over time to see what that could look like. Again, we didn't want to go through that step if the committee doesn't have an appetite for it whatsoever. And again, or maybe again to state, we're not looking to put building signage on there, which is the only reason we were asking for that to be excluded from the building signage allowance, is because we weren't looking to put a project name on there. We don't feel it would be appropriate to have the project name on there, but we did feel that maybe something that, again, builds upon what the great job of the city's done as far as the River Arts District, something that signifies that and helps pull people there. We thought that would help. So I hope I answered all the questions.
Yeah, that's a really helpful distinction about the signage, that it's not meant to be project identification, but rather district identification. And the River Arts District does have some of their own signage. You may have seen the cog as like one of the logos. And so they actually went through a process years ago to actually get some special district signage allowances. So that could be something, if supported by this committee, I can get you in touch with the right people to explore what would be appropriate, I guess, based on like what's already been accepted as the identifiers for the district. So.
If I may, Chris, and Shannon, couldn't that piece just be separate? They could pursue that aspect separate from this whole conditional zoning to say, hey, let's come up with
No, I think it has to be reflected that there's some sort of signage. Now, it could be district signage, and I think that has a much different level of, it's not nearly as concerning as project identification signage.
We can, as one of the conditions of approval, we can just say that would be district signage as approved by
yeah,
by staff and River Arts District.
And the project conditions can better reflect that. I think it wasn't super clear in there. And that makes more sense too, why it wouldn't be included in the overall allowance for the project.
And I'll just say just really quickly, Karen's reply or comment was that she thinks the smokestack is iconic enough, I think, on its own. So, and then there was this one last question about did the Brownfield agreement for this property influence the design at all? Or placement of the
Yeah, I think that's kind of a Warren question. I can say that from a legal standpoint, my law partner, Billy Clark, is kind of the environmental law expert in this area, and he's been advising the client about that Brownfield agreement, what's permitted, what isn't, and obviously we'll continue the dialogue with the state about that. But I know that Warren and CDC is well aware that there's a Brownfield agreement. There are restrictions associated with that will have to be taken into account with respect to the stormwater management, right, Warren?
That is right, Wyatt. Yeah, we recognize the Brownfield from day one and know that there will be appropriate reviews and steps and checks at that time. But I heard the question is two-part, the Brownfield side, and then how are we handling stormwater? So I apologize for not mentioning the Brownfield part of it, but yeah, we recognize that it's an overarching need there.
And to be clear, there's only a Brownfields agreement on the 159 parcel. The 144 parcel across the street doesn't have an agreement in place. It does have some contamination on it, but since we're not putting any structures over there other than permeable paving for parking, it's my understanding that we don't need a Brownfields agreement for that. But we were cognizant of both its designation as open space as well as its proximity to the river, and that's those are factors we considered in not putting any structures over there or not asking for permission to put structures over there.
Okay. I just wanted to acknowledge Brian Moffett. You have your hand raised. Do you want to say something?
I'm completely. I need to go back to this punch through thing. So as I read the form code, you've got two options in flood prone areas: either a full pass through, correct, or a raised staircase with a partial pass through. Am I reading that right, Shannon?
Yeah, that's
so they could keep the upper stories opaque if they had a staircase with a partial pass through on the retail level. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. And they do have the staircase. And
right,
as
I saw that in the elevation. So we're really only talking about not telling them they have to take it away above on the residential areas.
Correct. It's just to allow that air and light movement through there.
Okay, I'm just making sure
and just to clarify further, I believe the dimensions also all comply. It's just that it's glassed in and just not totally open.
Jane,
Jeremy, you have something to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I raised my hand, but
I didn't see it.
I guess I'll ask it now since Brian brought it up, and it's hard to answer the question of intent unless it specifically states, and maybe it does in the code. We want it to look this way for air movement, light movement, or I'm just wondering to myself, and I'm really posing it to the other members of the committee, as well as the applicant, but what is the purpose of this 200 feet? I mean, is it to say we don't want to have super long buildings, we want separate buildings? Or is it to say, or because of the punch through aspect and the setback and the 15 feet and so on, do we want to have this visual separation and pedestrian connectivity? I'm just wondering about the whole air thing, if that's really the intent or just one interpretation of the intent. And I'm really, I guess it's more for the designers I'd be interested in hearing about for that. Because obviously you have this long site, which and from a constructability standpoint, it's easier to do one structure, but I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I remember early discussions with design review, when looking at the form-based code, preventing things like we see down on the beaches, in coastal areas where there are walls of buildings blocking the view from anybody that's behind that building of the water. And I know that there was at least trying to have some punctuation so you didn't have big, long buildings for views. And maybe light and air is part of it, but, that was my recollection of it.
I think Sasha, she was more involved when in the community input, stage of drafting the form code. But I assume because it's a requirement that happens when a facade exceeds 200 feet, that part of the intent is to break up the visual mass of that building. And I think what Chris is saying is, they're attempting to meet the spirit of that to some degree by recessing it, kind of carving out that little niche, having the glass. I don't know that glass, even though it is transparent glass, I don't know if it kind of gives you that same visual, view through a building. But I think these are all good questions for the committee to wrestle with.
In the elevations, it's actually like a Core-10 material or something like that above the glass on that commercial core, and that's what's still shown on the punch through piece, at least in the hatch of the documents that we were provided. And also I'd note that the glass it's not the full story of that larger commercial piece. It just goes up the same height, and then it's solid. So I'm still having a little issue with it. It doesn't seem to. It clearly doesn't meet the express verbiage of the code, and I'm not 100% convinced it meets the spirit of it as it's currently shown to us.
And Brian, maybe I can help you there a little bit, but that glass does go up to the full underside of the slab there. What you're seeing on the Core-10 is basically that second level. So that is set back. So I think one of the just point of corrections is that glass does go from the top of that first floor all the way up to the slab above. And that's what you're seeing, full glass there. So from structural slab to structural slab, you're seeing glass. But Core-10 again is set back in that 15 feet, and that's vertical back in the 15 feet on just that second level.
Yeah, that's on sheet 2.1. On the 2.0, it reads differently.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was some masonry or something above the windows.
It's Core-10.
It's Core-10, yeah.
Yep. So there you go. And that only happens right there, Shannon, only in that area. And the reason is because that Core-10 continues, as you see further north, above the retail area. And again, that Core-10 and that retail space, all of that is pushed back underneath the building, and even the glass and glazing that you're seeing there on that second story, all of that is pushed back. And an effort of pushing that back is to activate, provide some public walkway that is on that north. Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate it. On that north side there. So really, what you're seeing on the Core-10 is it's pushed back, and then above that, where that Core-10 is only from that second floor slab up to the underside of that, what is basically the third floor slab.
Yeah, but
so Chris, I think what Brian is saying though is the storefront material and the Core-10 are in the same plane. They're both set 15 feet back, but it's solid above the glass. Yeah.
And that is correct, but
it doesn't really read like a break when you've got the Core-10 above it in the way.
I understand what you're saying, Brian.
Yeah, it's so that those design elements read as a linear piece. You got the Core-10 and you've got that storefront going across there. So I'm not reading it like it's a part of the break in the building. It's actually just part of that recessed facade. And please don't, if I could step back just a little bit, I'm extremely jealous of this design. It's a really well done. It's a good solution. There's lots of pieces I like about it. I've got quibbles. Love to get into some of them with you. You won't care, but we really have to, I think, address this punch through issue, because I think the other pieces on the setbacks and things like that are all well within grasp. I think once we get the setback issue resolved, I think we can start to move towards some kind of motion. At least that's my opinion. I don't know if anybody else has other things that are big sticking points.
The only issue that I would have is going back to parking and looking at the design guidelines and the Wilma-Dykeman plan. I find that the parking is inconsistent with both those documents that we are supposed to follow. I mean, on the design review guidelines, on page 7, parking should be minimized and not abut the street. And the parking lot on 144 abuts the street. And then the Wilma-Dykeman plan also says minimize the impact of parking lots on the riverway, and locate them to the side or below the building, and like you're doing with the building. I think the building, I agree with Brian, the building is, is a good response, but these other issues I have some issues with, still. And I couldn't find justification for what was proposed. It was page 7 of the design review guidelines and page 25 of the Wilma-Dykeman plan. Which we have to use to review.
Let me jump in on the parking question. We've had a lot of conversations with folks in that area, stakeholders, including the RAD business folks. And what we heard over and over again was, please, please, please create more than enough parking for your project, because we don't have enough in the River Arch district.
I know, Wyatt, but you have to understand that we have to follow the guidelines as well in our review. And there are things like buffering the parking with planting that isn't happening, to shield car. There's a height limit, not to see the hoods of cars along streets. Things like that are a part of the guidelines, are things that we have to look at as we're reviewing it. So I understand the request, believe me. And it happens in a lot of areas, need for parking, but we also have to look at how parking is being handled.
Jane, where it says on the design guidelines that it shouldn't directly abut the street, does that mean there just needs to be a vegetative buffer in between? Because it looks like they've got that on that parking across the street. Am I not understanding? Guidelines.
I'm looking at the guidelines. It says parking area directly abut the street should not directly abut the street, and planting should be used between the street and parking area such that any view of automobiles is filtered. It is preferable if nothing below the bottom of the windshields is visible.
So if they had a better vegetative screen between the across street parking and the pedestrian on the road, that would meet the intent of that guideline, correct?
Well, and it talks about minimizing parking, and I understand, I hear, the attorneys, saying that public's asking for more parking, but we also have a review process that says to minimize parking, and they're at the maximum, right? I mean, they're at the maximum allowable parking for the site.
Shannon, help me correct. I think 176 is the required parking spaces, and we're at 198, so we're 22 over. And the 144 parking lot is 41 spaces. So
that's correct. So we don't have a maximum. It's just you have to meet your basic requirement, which this project does.
I thought we had a minimum and a maximum requirement under the code.
Not in the RAD code.
Okay.
Just in our other districts, in our regular districts like highway business, we do, but not in the RAD.
And Brian, to your point, and maybe Jane, this helps as well. There's an abundance of plantings that are happening over on 144. If it pleases this group, we can certainly take some of the plantings that are shown to the northern area there, and put that more along the eastern side of that parking lot, barring any concerns that staff has with doing so. But yeah, you certainly want to take your advice on it. And if just moving some plantings around to help screen it helps alleviate those concerns, happy to do it.
Well, just need to understand that the plants are screening plants and not just trees, that you're looking through trunks to cars, That's not the intent of what the ordinance says.
Understood. And yeah, what you see on these plants is just the trees themselves. There's still numerous shrubs and ground covers that have to happen too. It's just such a multitude that at the CZ level, we don't go and put every shrub on there at this point.
Yeah, Warren, I think we just make that a condition that you provide vegetative screening on the 144 property between the road, the sidewalk, and the parking area. I think that would meet the intent of, at least as I understand it, of what that requirement is going for.
I think the only other comment that I would have is I kind of agree with comments that have been previously made about the smokestack. I think it is iconic by itself. I don't think it needs any signage on it, and it's it's part of the historic legacy of the river. And I think in respect of historic properties, it shouldn't have signage and art on it itself. And the idea of adding art in other public areas is appropriate, but I don't think on the smokestack itself.
Agreed. Are we ready to fight about the punch through again?
Can I clarify one last thing that Shannon said, and I want to make sure I understood it correctly. The rules of the RAD-NT overrule the expansion district rules with respect to the sidewalk. So an 8-foot sidewalk is what's required. They have a 10-foot one drawn. I'd like to hear from the applicant. Is there a reason why you put a 10-foot one there in order to shrink it down and deal with one of the other issues, right, Shannon?
Yeah, I mean, Warren can correct me if I'm wrong, but we were talking about this earlier. I think it's largely a misunderstanding. I think, where the requirement is more rigorous, which a 10-foot sidewalk would be more rigorous than an 8-foot sidewalk, I think they felt like perhaps they needed to show the 10-foot wide sidewalk. But I would agree that, where there's a conflict, so where both the expansion district and the RAD code have different standards, the RAD code would rule. So the 8-foot sidewalk would be the minimum required. Now, anybody can always offer a wider sidewalk. So that's one of the reasons we talked this morning is was there a real desire to have a 10-foot wide sidewalk? We obviously have this very activated streetscape. Maybe that was their preference and they wanted to reduce they wanted to, have less planting strip in order to have more sidewalk. But after speaking with Warren, I think, it was just, no, they just wanted to demonstrate full compliance. So I think if that's the case, then a simple revision to the plan to show an 8-foot wide sidewalk with a wider planting strip would be an easy fix.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree too. And I don't want to make it more complicated than it is, but looking at some photos and being out there recently, it looks like to me right now there's like a 5 and 5, so a 5-foot green strip and 5-foot sidewalk that was just installed in the last 18 months, 12 months. So we're happy to keep that if that's more the desire of the river, but certainly 8 seems to be something that we can all agree upon.
Well, I think the RAD code calls for 8. So I think that is what the vision for the district is. I think what got installed as part of RAD tip is a little bit of has a different goal and a different focus. So.
Yeah, and the other side of the road, I think to one of James' questions a little earlier, there's a bigger sidewalk on the other side of Riverside than is. It looks to be probably 10-foot wide with some planting wells in it. So there's a lot of connectivity in this area with the recent RAD improvements.
I want to go back and answer Jeremy. He asked the designers to answer the question, and we never did. So I'm going to answer it for him, or at least give Jeremy my answer. I think the intent of the code would be that those are not just visual breaks, but they're actual breaks in the building and in the building massing. I don't think the glass meets the intent of that verbiage. If they wanted to do that, they could have just said, we've got other form codes that talk about providing differentiation or breaking up the mass of the building for the downtown district and other districts, the Haywood Road Form District, whereas a full break-in is different. And so I don't think the glass actually meets that, even if they, I don't know. I just don't think that would meet that intent of that code. That's my 2 cents.
And Brian, just to also piggyback on that and give you some of our thoughts, is that our thought was you don't want a massive building that is flat coming down that on down Riverside Drive. I mean, you got to have some break there. Nobody wants that. So that's where we did take a look, and we think it's appropriate that the code says if you do take these 15 by 15 foot notches out, that you do break up that building. And so we think we were feeling between the balconies, that we're not creating a flat building and something that is more broken up and visually is more appealing, not only visually more appealing, but also it gives the visual appearance of, I won't say 3 separate buildings, but 3 portions of a building. That's also, some of the driving factor, and I won't say all of it, but on the north end where we do have the 2-story aspect of that building. I do want to get back to the glass and the air and movement going through. That's not, we didn't feel that was necessarily spelled out in the code, and that's where we felt that glass would still allow the visual break of that. We completely understand that may not be the disposition of this committee here, and we get that. I will say anything above that first elevated floor level there, we're completely open. If the Coritan isn't the right material to utilize above the glass on what would be level 2, we would be completely open to changing that material above the glass, again, to create more of a visual appeal there. But just to, again, confirm, we thought we were staying within this, or we feel we are staying within the spirit of the code by providing that light that goes through there. And that's floor to ceiling light, the entire 15-foot width, which is the width of that. As you come up the 15-foot wide stairs, we have that. It's set 15 foot back. So we kind of have those notches that divide that building up.
Shannon, could you bring up that piece of the code? It's Article T in 7829.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Chris, I understand what you're saying. I'm just going to try to tell you how I'm interpreting what I see in the diagrams and in the visual. So they clearly show your two options. You can have a full break in the building, or you can have basically a pass through in the building. And because they're both shown with stairs leading directly up to it, it's not just for visual, it's also for movement. And so I read that as both pedestrian movement and air, and as well as light. And so that's why I would say that glass wouldn't meet that the intent of both the images and the text.
Yeah. And Brian, I will say that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring it up and make sure that we get everybody's input on that. The only, I guess, in closing, one of the things I will make sure. So if you take a look at the image on the right in the code there, that glass actually is set even further back than the 15 feet. So you do come up the stairs and you don't necessarily hit glass. Want to make sure that's clear. So that glass is set further back, especially on that north side, because we want to create that pedestrian movement as on the north end where pedestrians are able to come up and move to the second floor area there. So there, as you come up the stairs on this north side here, you'll see, and again, it doesn't read in this, but that glass is pushed back. So,
so Chris,
and again, we wanted to bring it up so that we can get we didn't want to leave it as just our interpretation and move forward.
So just to clarify, Chris, the glass to the left of that stairway is in a different plane than the glass in the stairway, is what you're saying?
It is actually, that is correct, but I will say both of them are pushed back from the stairway. So in both instances, the glass and glazing is actually further back than the code required 15 feet.
So that they're in the same plane then? The glass is all in the same plane and this core tense is all in the same plane?
I believe so. I believe so. Now, we can make adjustments to that if that would help the committee. If that's a committee desire, we can make adjustments to that and put those in different planes so that they read even further apart, along with changing the core tan material above.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say it's very helpful to look at these drawings again, Brian. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah.
Just talk, Robin.
So I feel that the glass as shown does not meet the intent because it is the same language as the storefront next to it. It's divided the same way. So to me, it does not read visually as a break. If the glass was more open, I could see the argument there, but it looks to me like a linear continuation of the storefront. It's the same pattern. And then the core 10, I do understand you say the glass goes all the way up to the underside, but it doesn't necessarily read that way from the outside elevation to me.
Sure.
And from the lay person on the committee, I mean, that what Robin just said really kind of speaks to me as well. I look at these pictures that Shannon has up, and what speaks to me is pedestrian connectivity. We want to not only visually break the building up, but we want to provide access through. So I feel like you're doing everything other than it. If there was some different treatment, I think what Robin just said speaks a little bit to me as well. I don't think I'm not opposed to glass per se. I don't feel like that's, but I do feel like you do want to have that break and be more obvious in some manner.
Would and I guess if I were to throw an option out there, if we made sure that that glass are in different planes visually front to back, and then even if we went with a storefront or something, I'm just trying to come up with an idea that visually will make that different, while still allowing from a security and in HVAC standpoint.
If you look at the two elevation sheets, 2.0 and 2.1, I think it was, for me, a lot of it is because that language is not changing at all. If that entire void where you're showing core 10 and the storefront, if that was all glass and it was a different, maybe it was even the sash kind of glass that you have, it's just or a completely different language. I don't know, or it even looked more like your screen below. I don't know, something along those lines where you're really picking up a different element. And you did that in both locations, and it was the full. If you could go, Shannon, to the other. I keep trying to scroll. Thank you. The same thing here. Again, I know you said it went to the slab, but I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't. It needs to if you're going to tell the story that this is a 5-story building, but then that's not telling that story. So that should all be, if that was what you were going for, I think that all should be glass without the core 10 above. Anyway, again, I think it's a pedestrian access, and we're all kind of feeling our way through this, applying these standards. This is my first rodeo for the riverfront development stuff, so I'm trying to feel my way into what both the form code says as well as the design standards say, and how we apply those things. We're not completely bound by stare decisis, but it is a big deal when we make these kind of applications as to how they're going to be interpreted in the future.
Chris, can I ask a clarifying question? So we have the staircases. Then I guess I may have misunderstood. I thought there would be like, can a pedestrian actually physically walk through the glass opening to the other side, or are they leading to doors to other places?
Well, and that's, so I think this is the crux of it. There's not a pedestrian, I think the easiest way to answer that, Shannon, is right now, as a pedestrian would come up here, this portion of the building isn't necessarily public. So this is for private access for the residents. So somebody comes up this staircase and they hit that glass there, or even an opening, that would be clear opening. And as of right now, what we envisioned is they would hit the glass there and be able to cart in and go to their residence, right or left. Without glass there, somebody would come up there and then they would have to go and cart into the right or cart into the left on either the right or left hand side. Same being as if somebody was coming down the hallway, they would exit out of a set of doors and then have to cart into another set of doors. So from that standpoint, I hope that answered your question. And Brian, I just didn't want to.
I think so. You're saying that this isn't like a pedestrian connection through, whether it's a resident or a member of the public. You don't go all the way through. You basically enter into a unit.
You enter into the building. Yes.
Or into the building.
Okay. And Brian, and only because I want to make a point of, I think I misspoke or maybe, in fact, I know I misspoke, but on that south side, everything above there would not be the Coritan. There you go. So on that south side, that's actually what you're looking at would be the brick material back there. On the north side, we have the Coritan, but again, that Coritan would only run on that, what would be that second floor. There you go. Yeah. Everything above that would be the brick material as it's pushed back. And as it's pushed back and required to be pushed back per the code. I guess the only other option I could throw out there from a standpoint of, and again, I'm open to options from the committee themselves, but if we made, in lieu of the Coritan, continued the glass opening even on that second floor area, or even moved reduced the height of the glass and glazing in what I would say to the north or to plan left area there, if that would be acceptable to the committee. And I know we're kind of doing design on a fly, but that's I at least want to throw that out there as an option to see any feedback, or if there is any recommendations that the committee has, we're happy to accept those.
Does anybody have any suggestions for Chris? Based on your comments, Brian or Robin?
I mean, I do think that notch needs to look different and open for this to be a valid argument. And right now it looks exactly like what's next to it. It's not really the plane of the glass that I'm struggling with. It's just the visual linearness of that, and that the storefront's even divided the same exact way. So for that to work and be a valid argument, I would think that the second floor Coritan would go away, and that would be more open glass and a different language than what's next to it. But that's my opinion. But like Brian, this is also my first rodeo.
So I'm looking at your renderings, and so you've got the language of the storefront for the commercial piece. You've got the language of the kind of industrial sash for the residential piece, and then you've got the language of a different kind of storefront language on the adaptive reuse. And so you've got, three different types of glass kind of in the project. And I'm wondering if you pull in the language of the glass with that horizontal mullion that you've got on the top of of the mill building, of that adaptive reuse, and you incorporate that into the entire notch back there, so that you're kind of you're tying the two pieces together a little bit. That was actually one of my questions, and it's like, how do these two guys talk to each other other than just the brick material? And that would do that, and then it would offer a level of transparency. I don't know what Jane, Robin, and Jeremy and anybody else think about that, but that would be my suggestion, where you're not having to like introduce a whole new thing, but you're tying some things in together. By the way, just while I'm here, I love a lot of what you're doing, but the exposed little column on the corner that you peeks through, I'm not a fan. I liked it better when you had a podium and you didn't see that little concrete thing peeking in at the corner. That's nitpicking. That's not a condition.
So architect, Curligan architect.
Chris, you're muted.
You're muted.
Hey, Chris, can you unmute?
Yeah, sorry, Brian. What I was saying is it's funny you bring that column up, or those corners up, because we had a lot of internal discussion about those. So there are differing opinions. I'll just say that through.
Did the discussion about the pulling some of the storefront language of what you're doing on the mill building into that piece and extending the glass up and over make sense?
Brian, how does that address the openness, though, Brian, or the connectivity that you were looking at?
I'm not sure. I think again it goes to what Jeremy and Robin were pointing towards, is the intent of the code full movement of pedestrians, or is it like what you were talking about, you were just trying to prevent the flat wall and allowing, is it
views?
Is it views, or is it people?
I think it's both of those things, in my opinion.
And Brian, so first of all, thank you. No, that is helpful, because we tried to create enough distinction there, but I like the idea of pulling that glass over. So thank you for that. And again, we've got no qualms as far as continuing that glass even higher. And I would say not that glass, but again, some glass from the mill, and kind of speaking that language, as you said. And then, so we would be amenable to that. That's not an issue.
I mean, I'd like just to speak to the views issue. The fact that you're allowed to put a hole through the building and then continue up above speaks less about views to me. If there was a requirement to keep the two separate buildings, that would make more sense to me. To me, it's more about the pedestrian access.
Appreciate that.
I'm looking at the form code again, and it says, a direct pedestrian connection on top of the parking podium is provided from the front of the lot to the rear or to the intersecting alley or street behind. That's for the parking podium. It says something similar. Direct pedestrian connection on top of the podium provided from the front of the lot to the rear. The language sure does point pretty clearly to a pedestrian connection of openness from the front of the lot to the rear. I mean, that's pretty plain language.
And right now we have that pedestrian connection that goes up. It then, I will say, turns due north and continues, again, basically trying to funnel people to or through the mill building itself and creating another pedestrian connection there.
Yeah, but the language it says maximum building length options, and it talks about flood areas, non-flood prone areas, and then in every one of them it says from the front of the lot to the rear, and so, or to the intersecting alley or street behind. So it's actually really the language is pointing us really clearly that this pedestrian connection can't go part way into the building and then get stopped. It's intended to pass through. I'm trying to figure out how to help you with this thing, but the language has kind of got me trapped, honestly.
Yeah, I would just suggest maybe perhaps like the committee's given the applicant a good amount of feedback. This is all something they can take into consideration and update their plans if they so choose moving before, as we move through the conditional zoning process. Whatever they settle on, we'll include it as in their conditions, and will reflect that the committee expressed certain concerns and made certain suggestions, et cetera. And then
That's
I
right.
think
We don't have to do anything, do we? This committee.
Well, somebody has to make a motion at some point.
Yes, we do need to make a motion. And
Well,
we
it's,
can vote.
it's voluntary compliance,
It
not
is,
hotel,
yes.
but we do have to,
Well,
Voluntary compliance for all projects except hotels that are level 2s.
yeah, and before we go to a vote, I got an email or a notice from Sasha, has some questions that came from Karen Craig-Nolan. I don't know if Sasha, how do you want to, if she's on this screen?
They're just, maybe they could
Yeah,
be
thank
addressed really short, briefly, because we're running out of time, or ran out of time. One was about a green roof, and it just describe it more fully, and the second one was about if there's any soundproofing because of the railroad.
Hey, Chris, weren't you considering a green roof over top of the mill building?
That is correct. So that mill building, the rehabilitation of that mill building will have a green roof over it. And then as far as soundproofing, the windows themselves will be dual glazed windows from a soundproofing perspective.
So not triple glazed, double glazed, is what you're saying.
And I guess I meant to say detail. So is it fair to say the green roof details are still in development?
Yes.
Is there, so the green roof will just, I
Is
guess,
that a
it's just
condition?
reflecting all the rooftop, and I mean, is there any additional information about the green roof or how it'll operate on the mill building, or how much of the mill building? Is it the entire mill building roof? Is it just a small piece of the mill building roof? Anything you can share?
We were looking at the green roof or the mill building as a whole. So the
whole
roof
mill
that goes
building.
there.
Okay.
I will say we haven't, as far as what system or anything of that, we haven't gotten into that amount of detail yet.
And again, you're not doing historic tax credits on that building, right?
That's going to be up to Brendan at the end of the day. I know there's a lot of requirements that come with those, and we just haven't vetted those
And
out.
benefits, tax, yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I just I don't know if we've been able to fully vet those out. So. I want to thank everybody on the committee for your time and for your feedback. It's very much appreciated, and Shannon, and Sasha staff also. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, any more questions for staff or the applicant from committee?
I would really like to be able to make a motion on this one, but I can't approve it with the language about the pass through as it's currently presented.
Okay,
really
I appreciate that, Brian.
Could I suggest, since that seems to be a continuing concern and we just can't design it on the fly and resolve it here, that if this committee was so inclined to make a recommendation for approval subject to revision of that issue to establish a clear pass-through.
I would make that motion.
Are there any other conditions you want to add, Brian? There were things brought up about the sidewalk and the crosswalk and.
I'm out of practice, Jane. I was writing stuff down. So my conditions would be to address the pass-through issue in accordance with the form code to provide vegetative screening in the parking lot at 144 in accordance with the design guidelines, and then to adjust the width of the sidewalk to the 8-foot width and increase the size of the tree planting strip as proposed by staff. And then I think that would, and then that we are not recommending any project or district identification signage on the smokestack.
And the driveway width is, did you mention that? I'm sorry.
That was, the driveway width is acceptable as it's required by the fire marshal. I think I'm saying that correctly.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Robin? Okay, thank you. Okay, call the question. Robin Rains.
Aye.
Jeremy Goldstein.
Aye.
I'm not sure. Brian Moffett.
Aye.
Let's see, I don't know who else is on the, Karen
So
Cardone.
Stephen Lee was on. He just left, but he said he wanted to vote aye.
Okay, and Karen Pagnolan, is she still on connection, phone connection to somebody, Sasha?
Yes, she texted me aye. I don't know if that's kosher or not, but yes, she's here. She's listening. And can I just clarify, was there a condition that there's no signage on the smokestack?
Yes, yes, there was.
That's what she
Yeah.
wanted. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And with the suggestions that Brian has made, my biggest concern was the parking. And if indeed they can meet the guidelines, I still think there's too much parking, but that's my only concern. And I understand what Wyatt said about the neighborhood asking for more. And I appreciate the fact that there is going to be a covenant that will allow public parking. I will vote aye based on that. Okay, I think you have approval from this committee. So thank you, Chris, Wyatt, thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Jay. Thank
Lauren.
you, everybody. That's
Thank you.
okay.
Really helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right, thank you. Good luck.
All right. Take care.
Okay, let's see, I think we
We
have
have
one.
a timing issue here. We're about 2 hours and 15 minutes into this.
Do we need a break? We have one more item
I
on
got a
the,
break, but I don't know if we have time to review another whole project. I don't. And you needed how many people?
but
Yeah,
we need,
we
well-
would need 5, and Stephen Lee has dropped out now. So
okay. Is the applicant on the call?
I believe
Probably
so.
Warren
Warren, you're
was
part of that
everything.
applicant team.
Do you want to continue, Warren?
I just keep getting luckier and luckier. Is Peter and Eric and
Sid's on.
MHA still on?
I think Sid is on the call.
Step. Peter's about to step in.
Okay, I better make sure we get everybody's opinion on that as to whether we can afford to continue or not. And I certainly understand I've already had to change one meeting that I thought I had at 2:30.
Could I maybe suggest an alternative, which is to maybe do a very brief, like introduction to the, I mean, very brief, but like a reasonably brief introduction to the committee, and then continue to June 17th. We have time to, we haven't advertised yet for June 17th, so we could maybe get you on that agenda. And then that way the team, the committee can give you some initial feedback based on the design. Maybe, since we don't have a quorum.
Yeah, I don't know. Jeremy, do you have to go?
I'm gonna have to step off. I mean, I've got 5 more minutes.
Thanks, Jeremy.
It sounds like we don't have options, but yeah, we certainly want to push forward. And
Maybe
Peter, do you have opinions?
Well, what are the other projects scheduled for the 17th?
It's your 4 points project.
And 44 Collier.
We had a couple of projects requesting informal review.
Yeah, I think if we put this project on push it back to the 17th, we'll have 3 projects in that meeting. One is 44 Collier for the preliminary design review, 4 points, and this project. I would like to at least get a preliminary read from this group as to their opinion on the project as it stands right now. Maybe just a brief 5 or 10 minute introduction, and maybe you'll like it well enough that you just pass it now and we can roll on. But anyway.
Peter, unfortunately, we don't have a quorum any longer. So,
all right, who left?
Stephen Lee Johnson, and then we're about to lose Jeremy Goldstein.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the dilemma. So we were thinking maybe
Okay.
for those who can stay, we could do the introduction, at least get a read, you know,
All right.
so that maybe we could be more efficient next time.
That would be fine. Certainly would, yeah.
All right. Jane, would you like me to dive in?
Sure. And I guess this is an informal discussion then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get my screen sharing here, and I'm going to try to be really brief, and then we can let Peter and Sid kind of jump in and share some more thoughts. So a couple of you have seen the project already. This is basically the corner of Biltmore and South Market Street here to the north. If you're familiar, catty corner to the northwest is the Orange Peel, just for context. And you also are probably familiar with how the topography really drops off. So if you drive down South Market, you know, you really drop in elevation. Same is true for this property. It drops across the back. So the proposal is for a 9-story mixed-use building, but only 6 of those stories are going to be visible from the primary pedestrian street of Biltmore Avenue and also from South Market. You can see some of the additional stories or some of that additional height on the shared property line to the south, and then also from the rear from the South Market Extension alley. This is a publicly maintained alley, one of the few in the city that comes off of South Market. So for the plans, you can see better here. This is the South Market elevation. So the north elevation looking at the building. So you can see those 6 stories. At the ground level, we have a commercial, non-residential space for the majority of South Market and for all of Biltmore. There is a portion of that ground level that will have some residential units, but at least as far as the street facing side is concerned, it's going to read like a non-residential ground level commercial space. Then wrapping the corner, this is when you start to go on the east elevation. So this would be the rear of the property, kind of going clockwise around it. This is off of that South Market extension. So here you can see we have 3 levels of structured parking tucked underneath the 6 stories that are above ground. And you can see we have entrance from both South Market and then this lower entrance from the South Market extension. This is the elevation on the shared property line to the south. And again, you can see some of that additional height. And then the main principal facade or primary facing facade is here on Biltmore Avenue. The applicant is proposing a combination of fiber cement panels and EIFS, and they've offered this kind of handy key that kind of shows that on the most visible sides, those pedestrian sides of Market Street and Biltmore Avenue is the fiber cement panels. And then on the sort of more hidden sides, from the rear and the south facing side is the EIFS. We also have the anodized aluminum window frames and then this kind of polished concrete block at the base. And then some perforated metal for the balconies. The applicant provided some renderings that I think are really helpful, where you can kind of see the more of the design and kind of what to expect. Both the residences, or rather you see that one of the principal entrances into the residences, and then you have this kind of recessed, covered dining area for the restaurant at the ground level. Here you are on the Biltmore Avenue side, and you can see that additional commercial space for the retail. And then continuing along on, here's more of an axonometric view from the corner, so you can kind of really see the building. And then from the rear. And then again from the side. So I think these are helpful. There's also a close-up of the courtyard on the side, and then here is the project in context with the block. This project's been to technical review. It actually complies. There's one little piece of sidewalk that's missing, but it's because of the unusual shape of the property line, and they'll still be able to comply. They just pay a small fee in lieu for the little bit of sidewalk that they're unable to construct. But otherwise, it complies with the step back requirements, which really don't apply in this particular case because of the width of Biltmore Avenue, the fenestration requirements, the lot coverage and frontage requirements, all of that. I think as far as the UDO downtown standards go, it complies. The design guidelines is a little bit harder. There's definitely design guidelines that are absolutely supported and addressed. The one that is a little bit hard to interpret, and I should update my staff report because I noticed I accidentally included, I think it was like 1F and 1G in both the complies with and doesn't comply. And I think that's a little, I think I meant for it to really be in the doesn't comply or partially complies section. And it's really, and you know, again, it's a little bit like the punch through. I'm just really curious what this committee thinks of. It's not just the mass. This is a little bit of a mishmash of materials and designs in this particular corner or this, you know, section of the downtown. But it just, this building just has a lot of different kind of roof lines, kind of jogging around and up and down and cutting in and cutting out. And then we also have the balconies that protrude. And we also have this kind of hidden recessed area where I know in some of the informal discussion, there was some question about, you know, trying to enhance the principal entrance into the structure. So it read, you know, stronger. And so these are some of the things that I think, you know, staff is particularly curious what the committee thinks and whether or not there are other things that want to be shared. So I'll stop there. And I don't know if Peter or Sid have more that they want to offer or if the committee just wants to kind of jump in with some questions.
Shannon, can I just offer one comment regarding the shape of the building? It's a little bit difficult to meet the step rack requirements for a building that's even modest in height because the step backs are required on both main streets. So if this were in mid-block, it would probably or most likely have a little bit more of or fewer step backs. But because we're looking at we're facing two key streets, the step backs are required along both streets. And the strategy was we would step in the required 10 feet along 2/3 of each facade, which is what one of the options is in the guidelines. So what you're looking at in plan is essentially a 9-square grid. And there's a third on the South Market Street side and 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 on the Biltmore Avenue side. And we've chosen to do our step backs based on pushing in 2/3 of each facade on those respective streets to meet that requirement above the height limit. So that's, and then the other is that we felt that because of the scale of the houses that are down the hill, the ones that Larry Turner owns, and then the other ones, that we wanted to step the building down a little bit more on the south side to try to be in at least respectful of the scale of those buildings, of those houses.
So I might have to defer to Sasha on this, but I actually didn't think step backs applied because the width of Biltmore Avenue is 60 feet and you establish your street wall based on the width of Biltmore Avenue. And that would be basically the floor of the highest level. So I felt like we measure height from the base to the floor of the highest level. So that is 60 feet as I measured it. So I didn't think we actually had a step back. Does that sound right, Sasha?
I'm going to mute you guys because you're so much feedback. I know we went through this building, and I can't remember if we did it with Peter and Eric or Sid and with Jessica. And I don't entirely remember where if the front was South Market or was the front on Biltmore? Because
Biltmore is a key pedestrian street and South Market is not.
Right.
Right.
But I think the front of the building.
The way that we read the guidelines was there's nothing in there that addresses a corner building. I mean, there's no exception for a corner building to only do one or the other. So we assumed that we had to do both.
I think if the step back applied.
Well, that's what, Shannon, in all our discussions up till now, we were assuming that it did apply, that we were proposing to do that.
Right.
Based on what our preliminary feedback was. Because I remember Jessica was in on a conversation early on, and so was Sasha, about this whole issue. And the issue of the step back height was measured from the widest street, which is Biltmore Avenue, which established that height. And we were allowed to carry that around the north side of the building as long as we did the step back. Even though on the north side of the building, it exceeds the width of South Market Street's right of way.
Okay.
So somewhere there's an interpretation.
Yeah, it might be me, Peter. I might be misunderstanding. I thought that we weren't applying step backs in this particular project. And so that was part of why I was a little confused about all of the lines and such, but we'll talk about that. I don't know if that's the best use of our limited time today. So let's you, me, and Sasha kind of explore that more, and we'll figure that out. But let's see if the committee members, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we invite the committee members to speak?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I still like it, Peter. I like the reveals that you've introduced. I like the materials that's come a long way. I got some nitpicks as usual. So let me back up real quick and address Shannon's question. So my understanding of that 1F is talk about, we don't want these buildings that are all these big long kind of gestalt of 100-foot long blocks. We don't want federal buildings anymore. We want buildings that are better designed. And I believe this one is that it's got the way the base is articulated, the way the corners articulated. Peter's got that kind of recessed piece that corresponds with a break in the restaurant and retail. I think all of that works, and I think that meets my interpretation of the intent of that section of the design guidelines. At least that would be my interpretation of it from an architectural perspective. Nitpicks Peter and said as I'm looking at this image, a couple things. One, the perforation stuff is just not working. The building is got a fairly high level of refinement, and the way that piece just kind of hangs down. In some cases, it hangs out over the nichiha cladding, and it doesn't look like it's really got any kind of bottom to it. I don't know. It's just it muddies up the elevations for me in a lot of respects, and it just feels like it's not in keeping with the rest of what's going on the building.
Brian, which piece are you referring to? Is
the perforations around the balconies, the perforated panel.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, Peter. It just maybe it's a rendering thing, but I mean I've thought about it a lot. I've looked at a lot of the different renderings. I think part of it is that you've got just such a well-defined with the way you're doing your reveals and the way you're continuing everything, everything is kind of boxed and framed. And then you've got this piece that kind of, it's like it doesn't know where to stop. So it hangs down below and above. And it's just, I don't know. It's for some reason it's jarring to me.
Okay.
That is just you know how I do. I'm sorry. That on the Stormwater Avenue side, that little covered area, that on the right hand side in that roof, that piece looks really light to me. On that covered roof, I don't know why. It's like it wants to be thicker and
Up here.
more in keeping.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
the way that thin thing is, it just kind of looks tacked on right now, and the way that column's standing out there in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. It's not finished, I think. And then I would say I like this is a great elevation to look at. So I like the way you kind of started to tuck the balconies on top of and underneath on the corner there at Biltmore Market, right? So they feel integrated. The ones on the other side feel like they're just really tacked on and hanging off. You see what I'm trying to say? That's a small thing, I know, but it feels like the balconies are pretty well integrated most of the places, just on that one side. Maybe that's not a big deal. I don't know if anybody else cares or anything, but yeah, I think it's come a long way. I like it. If you built it just like it was, I wouldn't throw rocks at you or anything.
Thank you.
So this is my first rodeo with downtown design guidelines. And the things that I saw, Peter, were on the palette of materials. They came across as non-urban material palette. And looking at the recommendations, the 2F talks about brick, terracotta, cut stone, or other materials similar to brick that are used for large surfaces. And then recommendation 2G, authentic materials are encouraged, and often simulated finish systems, simulated finish systems should not be used. So things like EFIS should not be used.
Well, Jane, EFIS has always been allowed.
I know it sucks. It sucks. It's a terrible material, but I remember being quizzed by John Boyle about the use of EFIS downtown. How long will it last? And I said it won't last long, as we all know. And that's, again, I'm looking at the guidelines, it says not to use that material.
Well, I think another part of the guidelines, it says EFIS can be used except at street level. So there's
It does. You're correct. It mentions that.
Yeah. So there's
contradiction.
Yeah. The thought behind the fiber cement panel was that we're trying to push the client to not do the whole building in EFIS. So the compromise with them right now is that they like this fiber cement panel. It has a linear score mark in it that's not a big panel that you would typically see on a more of a market rate apartment building, but something that's a thicker panel, a little bit more refined. And the image on the left-hand side is an image that shows the application of that material, believe in either Portland or Seattle. So we were trying to move away from all of our clients who like using EFIS because it's inexpensive, to move them into something that is a better, longer lasting material. So this is our step.
Your compromise. And I appreciate that. I understand, but I'm just looking at the guidelines. The other thought was, it's been mentioned a couple of times about there's not a defined entrance to the building. And I think that that's another design issue that I've noted, been noted a couple of times by people.
Yeah, my comment or response to that is there are really three entrances into the building. One is the retail space down on the southwest corner. The other is at the northwest corner, which is where the restaurant entry is. And then the third one, of course, is a residential entry on the Market Street side. So what we're trying to, we struggled a lot with trying to enhance the entry on the Market Street side with some type of projecting element or column or frame. And there's not enough room with the width of the sidewalk to have additional elements there. At one point, we had more room, but had to push the building north in order to have windows on the south side of the building due to the proximity to the property line. So we're shoehorning this building in, and due to the sizes of the units that are really on the small side compared to other units of this type. So we feel that the design that we have right now for the entry on Market is the better solution than trying to introduce some type of column or framework or something that would project out into the public right of way, which we couldn't do anyway. So maybe what we'll do for the 17th is have a more detailed rendered view of what that actually looks like, so we can, talk about that. But there's been a lot of effort put into trying to make that a distinct entry that is really private from the other parts of the building that are obviously more public.
I felt like you'd addressed the entrance to the restaurant from the earlier schemes, and I felt like the residential entrance was more prominent than it was before. I guess it would be that little entrance on the retail side that could still use some addressing.
Brian, you're talking about the entrance to the right side of the elevation?
Yeah. Like from what I remember before, the restaurant seems, I could see where to go for the restaurant, and I could actually see where to go for the residences. It's for the retail piece that it's not as well defined. At least to me.
Right, we'll look at that. That's one thing I'd like to note is that the masonry piece that's to the left of that recess, that's the exit stair. So there's the exit door coming out of that exit stairs going into the same alcove where the retail entry is. So we'll look at that and have some more detailed pictures of what that could look like for the 17th.
Karen Craig Nolan had asked, she said, with no sidewalk on one side, how do pedestrians and wheelchairs access here? I'm not sure, but we have sidewalks on the two sides
yes.
on the street. So there is accessible access along the street.
Right, yeah, so Karen responded that there's no right of way without sidewalk. And I guess on the alleyway in the rear, you're not expecting people to be walking up and down there or using a wheelchair.
Yeah, how do they get to parking if they're in a wheelchair? I guess is what her question would be.
All the parking in the building's private. So you would go in the building. It's for the people who live there. There's an elevator that services every floor of the parking garage.
Yeah, but if you lived, Peter, in the apartments and then wanted to go downtown, say to the Orange Peel, how do you get there?
Down the elevator and through the residential lobby out to the sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you come out that's all handicap accessible. Just inside that door is a lobby for the residents, and then just past that's the elevator that services the entire building.
So if you were parking to go to the retail and downstairs, you would come up to that lobby and come out to the sidewalk to get to the retail?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that a drop off right there too, Peter? Remembering that correctly?
Well, there's supposed to be 3 parking or 2 parking spaces that the city had requested, and they're not formally drop off. far as short-term parking or any of that. They're just standard parking spaces.
Yeah, that road through there is extremely sort of widened, and this kind of helps define it a little bit better. If you look at curb line and paint out there on the, or lack thereof paint, it's kind of a sea of asphalt.
This is proposed as to be a hotel. So hotels are required, hotels in the downtown are not allowed to have on-street loading. So they're supposed to load from the interior or from the rear of the project. So like if you want to have
we haven't asked for
drop-off,
any drop off there at all. So
right. Not on the street. If you
Right.
want one, we're trying to encourage people to do it like behind the building or in the garage itself. As you see, a lot of urban applications, a lot of urban hotels will do that. The other hotel design requirement is that 50% of your street facing facade, at least 50%, be set aside for a non-hotel use, like a separate storefront use, which they have done in this case. You've got the retail and the restaurant use both would qualify.
Any other comments?
My only comment would be there's a reparations event tonight at the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium, which you can also watch live. And staff, including myself, will be there. So
Thank y'all for
Places to go,
hanging
things
in with us.
So I hope that helps the applicant, Peter. I hope that helps.
I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your time today too.
Thank you.
And I would ask, on our agenda is an informal discussion and public comment. And if we have anybody, David, waiting?
We do not. There's no one in the queue at this time.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
You have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, and I'll call the roll. Robin Rains.
Aye.
Brian Moffitt.
Yes.
Let's see who's left. So Stephen Lee's gone, right? And Karen's not on.
And Jeremy's gone.
Karen says
Jeremy.
aye.
So I guess that just leaves me, and I'm all for it. Thank you all for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
Thank you, staff
Thank you
as
for your
well.
time.
Thanks.
See you all on the 17th for those who are here.